Hello and welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. I am your host, your MC, your master of ceremonies, your horror host, as the case were. And my name is Richard-Lael Lillard. Richard-Lael is one name. Richard is not my name. My name is Richard-Lael. That is my first name. If I were just Richard, I would be a dick. Hello, T. Fourth day of asking you to marry me. Thank you very much for that. We're a little bit early because I accidentally set my clock 2 minutes fast. So the bell already rang, but that is fine because now everyone is able to get a drink and relax, get a blanket, get something, something to drink, something to cuddle with, something to snuggle with. And I am going to go right over here and I'm going to share all of this with my other medias of social. Let's see. I think I'm going live. I think I'm live there. Let me see. I'll share that one and we'll copy that link and then we'll go right back over here to the Book of Faces. And let's see, where are we? Sorry, I must find where I am over here. So we'll do this comment here, put that there, post, and there we go. Okay. Christy Cragen, hello. Good evening, Shrouded Grove. Hello, Laura. Good evening. Good evening, my darlings. I am so excited to continue reading this story. I do so enjoy it. John Maxwell, good evening. Oh, I should turn my volume down just in case. Okay, yeah, the lighting is good. I didn't know if I liked the lighting. I did some changes, but I know that's not really why you're here. So I want to tell you, first and foremost, how grateful I am that you are here. And I wanted to tell some little personal stories. I have, in my business of what I do, I work with people all day long. And thank you, Monferno. Appreciate that. I work with people and I talk to people and I meet them where they are. And when people get readings from me, we talk and I listen and I'm kind. And there was a woman who is going to be going away and she cried today because she said that I had become so very special. Black on you is a lush color. Thank you, John Maxwell. I do love to wear black. It's my happy color. Shadow Stevens, hello, loving your all black. Thank you so much. I am wearing all black today. Why? I don't know. I wanted to wear black today. I think it's so chic. Though I will tell you something kind of funny. Many years ago, my father passed away on my birthday, and I went to my father's funeral, and my niece and I, we had at this point we had not been friendly to each other, and mostly it was one-sided. She was not as friendly to me as perhaps she should have been. She later apologized, and I am grateful for that, which is lovely. But she says to me, I was wearing a pink tie, and she says to me, "Pink tie, I see." And I said, "Yes, it's my favorite color." And she says, "Thought so." And I snapped and I said, black is supposed to be slimming. Funny how it doesn't work on everyone. Welcome, Mary Jane. I haven't even started the book yet. Dawn Brother says, loving all black. Thank you very much. Shrouded Grove, I've just bought the Club Dumas. Have you read that book? It has the devil in it. No, I haven't, but I should perhaps look into it. I have a plethora of 19th and early 20th century stories that I would love to read that in some way deal with the devil. And so that's what we're going to be doing even as of today. So while you are here, make certain that you have picked your poison. My poison, as always, is strychnine. It's so smooth and so refreshing and so healthy too. Do you still have the pink tie? No, that pink tie, it disintegrated. It was very old. But since then, I do have other pink ties. Um, Pink was considered a boy's color. Absolutely, it was. Cousin to cousin, not cool on her part. Yes, you are right. She and I had a very strained relationship. She later apologized, and I am grateful, and I won't speak ill of her. But growing up and even into young adulthood, we did not see eye to eye. And on many things, not the least of which was religion and my attractions versus hers. And also, she and my brother were rather callous when it came to the passing of my father. But that is another story for another day, perhaps. Mm, more strychnine. So, if you have not picked your poison, now would be the right one. Yes, you are right, Dawn Brothers. Vita Meta Vegemin. I'm not quite so talented as she, I think. Now, this one has a little bit of it has a little bit of a forward, even though we have read several stories so far. Oh, I wanted to show you, of course, as always, the cover, Speak of the Devil, was designed by the infamous Salvador Dali. Hello, Amanda. Welcome. Okay. And now, ladies and gentlemen, boils and ghouls, and those who remain undecided, I now speak of the devil. Foreign devils. Whether or not you agree that nationalism is the work of the devil, it is obvious to all students of diabolism that the devil is a nationalist. In old Russia, he was a bloodthirsty Slav, full of vodka and borscht, bitter as Gorky, dour as Dostoevsky. In Poland, he has had every attribute of a colonel, when not emulating a barefoot peasant beating his wife. His Walpurgis Night antics in Germany anticipated the mountaintop orgies of Julius Streicher. Hell itself is a Teutonic word from Hel, daughter of Loki and queen of the underworld. Bon vivant of the Demonond, his French alter ego, celebrated the Black Mass with the Hussmans and always welcomed Aubrey Beardsley at Callus. Only in England has the devil been a world citizen, not noticeably Anglo-Saxon. First cousin of the Saxons, nefarious Nephilim, he undoubtedly danced beneath the mistletoe and celebrated the winter solstice with the Druids. Later, he drank wassail and played bloody bones, taking in vain the Mass of our Savior. By the time he was completely disassociated with Stone Age, he had begun to assume a Levantine complexion and bore a remote resemblance to Drizeli. Never out of the top drawer in later years, the devil needed a stronger bond than his old school tie to seduce Etonians. His work for the British Foreign Office in the Middle East is seldom mentioned at the better clubs. But those who feel that Satan is the Empire's chief collaborator should remember that he plays few favorites among international conveners. He stood at Machiavelli's shoulder as that Florentine wrote The Prince, and his cloven hoof was later seen in that little propaganda minister in Berlin. Internationalists who wish a federated world forget that the most polished delegate at any conference will be a gentleman who has been making war his profession since time immemorial. A master of protocol and balance of power, politics, he understands the irony of peace in our time. French. Satan's adaptability is not the least of his charms. As Eve discovered when she passed the time of day with a certain wily serpent who had twined himself about the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. In medieval Paris, we can safely assume that the tortured, hungry student found the devil of great assistance in arguing the minute details of the latest heresy. It might be reasonable to suppose that Villon drained many tankard in his company at Fat Margot's, and to Villon the devil would have been another adept at roistering as well as rhyme. Surely Satan daintily embraced many an aristocrat in the Bastille, while the tumbril waited for its cargo, making a mental tally of his progress while readjusting the perfumed lace on his satin sleeve. Of recent years, in Paris, he has been boulevardier with an acquired taste for vermouth and the less respectable products of the daily press. He has played the sophisticated lover and gambler, the gourmet who knows each spécialité de la maison. He has learned the whereabouts of the best wine, and he has had a roving eye for trim, feminine figure and an empty purse. Baudelaire welcomed this Satan into his decadent circle. In The Generous Gambler, we find a certain admiration for the devil's talents. Guy de Maupassant, devil is a Norman landowner, but lazy, and no match for St. Michael's trickery and deceit. But this devil, too, is very French. A mere footnote to history, it might be added in passing that Satan cheerfully carried the first bundle of it's called sticks. It's what you burn with, but it's becomes a slang. A mere footnote to history, it might be added in passing that Satan cheerfully carried the first bundle of sticks to the feet of the Maid of Orleans, that he tied Laval's white tie on occasion, that he hooded many a Colgard, and often disused the return of the monarchy at certain Parisian cafés. But in no case was his cloven hoof noticeable in the company present at the time. The Generous Gambler, Charles Baudelaire. Yesterday, across the crowd of the boulevard, I found myself touched by a mysterious being I had always desired to know, and whom I recognized immediately. In spite of the fact that I had never seen him, he had, I imagined, in himself, relative as to me, a similar desire, for he gave me, in passing, so significant a sign in his eyes that I attended to obey him. I followed him attentively, and soon I descended behind him into subterranean dwelling. Astonishing to me as a vision was shown a luxury of which none of the actual houses in Paris could give me an approximate example. It seemed to me singular that I had passed so often that prodigious retreat without having discovered the entrance. There reigned an exquisite and almost stifling atmosphere which made one forget almost instantaneously all the fastidious horrors of life. There I breathed the sombre sensuality like that of opium smokers, when, sat on the shore of the enchanted island, over which shone an eternal afternoon, they felt borne in them, to the soothing sounds of melodious cascades, the desire of never again seeing their households, their women, their children, and of never again being tossed on the decks of ships by storms. There were their strange faces of men and women, gifted with so fatal a beauty that I seem to have seen them years ago, and in countries which I fail to remember, and which inspired in me that curious sympathy and that equally curious sense of fear that I usually discover in unknown aspects. If I wanted to define in some fashion or other the singular expression of their eyes, I would say that never had I seen such magic radiance, more energetically expressing the horror of ennui and of desire, of the immortal desire of feeling themselves alive. As for mine host and myself, we were already, as we sat down, as perfect friends as if we had always known each other. We drank immeasurably of all sorts of extraordinary wines, and, a thing not less bizarre, it seemed to me, after several hours, that I was no more intoxicated than he was. However, gambling, this superhuman pleasure, had cut at various intervals our copious libations, and I ought to say that I had gained and lost my soul. As we were playing with a heroic carelessness and light-heartedness, the soul is so invaluable a thing, often useless, and sometimes so troublesome, that I did not experience as to this loss more than that kind of emotion I might have had I lost my visiting card in the street. We spent hours in smoking cigars whose incomparable savor and parfum give the soul the nostalgia of unknown delights and sights, and intoxicated by all these spiced sauces, I dared, in an access of familiarity which did not seem to displease him, to cry, as I lifted a glass and filled to the brim with wine, "To your immortal health, old goat." We talked of the universe, of its creation, and of its future destruction, of the leading ideas of the century, that is to say, of progress and perfectibility, and in general all kinds of human infatuations. On this subject, His Highness was inexhaustible in his irrefutable jests, and he expressed himself with a splendor of dictation and with magnificence in drollery, such as I have never found in any of the most famous conversationalists of our age. He explained to me the absurdity of different philosophies that had so far taken possession of men's brains, and deigned even to take me in confidence in regard to certain fundamental principles, which I am not inclined to share with anyone. He complained in no way of the evil reputation under which he lived, indeed, all the world, and he assured me that he himself was, of living beings, the most interested in the destruction of superstition, and he avowed to me that he had been afraid, relatively, as to his proper power, once only, that was on the day when he had heard a preacher, more subtle than the rest of the human herd, cry in his pulpit, "My dear brethren, do not ever forget, when you hear the progress of lights praised, that the loveliest trick of the devil is to persuade you that he does not exist." The memory of this famous orator brought us naturally to the subject of academies, and my strange host declared to me that he didn't disdain, in many cases, to inspire the pens, the words, and the consciences of pedagogues, and that he almost always assisted in person, in spite of being invisible, at all the scientific meetings. Encouraged by so much kindness, I asked him if he had any news of God. Who has not his hours of impiety, especially as the old friend of the devil? He said to me with a shade of unconcern, united with a deeper shade of sadness. We salute each other when we meet, but for the rest, he spoke in Hebrew. It is uncertain if His Highness has ever given so long an audience to a simple mortal, and I feared to abuse it. Finally, as the dark approached shivering, this famous personage, sung by so many poets and served by so many philosophers, who work for his glory's sake without being aware of it, said to me, "I want you to remember me always, and to prove to you that I, of whom one says so much evil, am often enough bon diable to make use of one of your vulgar locations, so as to make up for the irredeemable loss that you have made of your soul. I shall give you back the stake you ought to have gained. If you are fated if your fate had been fortunate, that is to say, the possibility of solacing and of conquering during your whole life, this bizarre affection of ennui which is the source of all your maladies and of all your miseries. Never a desire shall be formed by you that I will not aid you to realize. You will reign over your vulgar equals. Money and gold and diamonds, fairy palaces, shall come to seek you and shall ask you to accept them without your having made the least effort to obtain them. You can change your abode as often as you like. You shall have in your power all sensualities without latitude, in lands where the climate is always hot, and where the women are as scented as the flowers. With this he rose and said good-bye to me with a charming smile. If I had not been for the shame of humiliating myself before so immense an assembly, I might have voluntarily fallen at the feet of this generous gambler, to thank him for his unheard of munificence. But little by little, after I had left him, an incurable defiance entered into me. I dared no longer believe in so prodigious a happiness, and as I went to bed, making over again my nightly prayer by means of all that remained in me the matter of faith, I repeated in my slumber, My God, my Lord, my God, my Lord, do let the devil keep his word with me. I like that one. Hello, Mary Jo. The Legend of Mont Saint Michel. Guy de Maupassant. I had at first seen it from Cancale, this fairy castle in the sea. I got an indistinct impression of it as a grey shadow outlined against the misty sky. I saw it again from Avranches at sunset. The immense misty sky, or the immense stretch of sand was red, the horizon was red, the whole boundless bay was red, the rocky castle rising out there in the distance like a weird seigneurial residence, like a dream palace, strange and beautiful. This alone remained black in the crimson light of the dying day. The following morning at dawn, I went forward toward it across the sands, my eyes fastened on this gigantic jewel as big as a mountain, cut like a cameo, and as dainty as lace. The nearer I approached, the greater my admiration grew, for nothing in the world could be more wonderful or more perfect. As surprised as if I had discovered the habitation of a god, I wandered through those halls supported by frail or massive columns, raising my eyes in wonder to those spires which looked like rockets starting for the sky, and to the marvelous assemblage of towers, of gargoyles, of slender and charming ornaments, irregular fireworks of stone, granite, lace, a masterpiece of colossal and delicate architecture. As I was looking up in ecstasy, a lower Normandy peasant came up to me and told me the story of the great quarrel between Saint Michel and the devil. A skeptical genius has said, God made man in his image, and man has returned the compliment. This saying is an eternal truth, and it would be very curious to write the history of the local divinity of every continent, as well as the history of the patron saints in each one of our provinces. The black man has his ferocious man-eating idols. The polygamous Mohammed men fills his paradise with women. The Greeks, like practical people, defied all the passions. Every village in France is under the influence of some protecting saint, modeled according to the characteristics of the inhabitants. Saint Michel watches over Lower Normandy. Saint Michel, the radiant and victorious angel, the carrier, the hero of heaven, the victorious, the conqueror of Satan. But this is how the Lower Normandy peasant, cunning, deceitful, and tricky, understands and tells the struggle between the great saint and the devil. To escape from the malice of his neighbor, the devil, Saint Michel built himself in the open ocean This habitation worthy of an archangel, and only such a saint could build a residence of such magnificence. But as he still feared the approaches of the wicked one, he surrounded his domains by quicksands more treacherous even than the sea. The devil lived in a humble cottage on the hill, but he owned all the salt marshes, the rich lands where grow the finest, the wooded valleys, and the fertile hills of the country, while the saint ruled only over the sands. Therefore, Satan was rich, whereas Saint Michel was as poor as a church mouse. After a few years of fasting, the saint grew tired of this state of affairs and began to think of some compromise with the devil. But the matter was by no means easy, as Satan kept a good hold on his crops. He thought the thing over for about 6 months. Then one morning he walked across to the shore. The demon was eating his soup in front of his door when he saw the saint. He immediately rushed toward him, kissed the hem of his sleeve, invited him in, and offered him refreshments. Saint Michel drank a bowl of milk, and then began, "I have come here to propose to you a good bargain." The devil, candid and trustful, answered, "That will suit me. Here it is. Give me all of your lands, Satan." "Oh, give me all of your lands." Satan, growing alarmed, wished to speak, but, the saint continued, "No, listen first. Give me all your lands. I will take care of all the work, the ploughing, the sowing, the fertilizing, everything, and we will share the crops equally. How does that suit you?" The devil, who was naturally lazy, accepted. He only demanded, in addition, a few of those delicious grey mullets which are caught around the solitary mount of Saint Michel. Saint Michel promised the fish. They grasped hands and spat on the ground to show that it was a bargain. And the saint continued, "See here, so that you will have nothing to complain of. Choose that part of the crops which you prefer, the part that grows above ground, or the part that stays in the ground." Satan cried out, "I will take all that would be above ground." "It's a bargain," said the saint, and he went away. 6 months later, all over immense domain of the devil, one could see nothing but carrots, turnips, onions, salsify, all the plants whose juicy roots are good and savory, and whose useless leaves are good for nothing but the feeding of animals. Satan wished to break the contract, calling Saint Michael a swindler, but the saint, who had developed quite a taste for agriculture, went back to see the devil and said, "Really, I hadn't thought of all that. It was just an accident, no fault of mine. And to make things fair with you this year, I'll take everything that is under the ground." "Very well," answered Satan. The following spring, all the evil spirits of the lands were covered with golden wheat, oats and big as beans, flax, magnificent colza, red clover, peas, cabbage, artichokes, everything that develops into grains or fruit in the sunlight. Once more Satan received nothing, and this time he completely lost his temper. He took back his fields and remained deaf to all the fresh propositions of his neighbor. A whole year rolled by. From the top of his lonely manor, Saint Michel looked at the distant and fertile lands and watched the devil direct the work, take in his crops, and thresh the wheat. And he grew angry, exasperated at his powerlessness, as he was no longer able to deceive Satan. He decided to wreak vengeance on him, and he went out to invite him to dinner for the following Monday. "You have been very unfortunate in your dealings with me," he said. "I know it, but I don't want any ill feeling between us, and I expect you to dine with me. I'll give you some good things to eat." Satan, who was greedy, as he was lazy, accepted eagerly. On the day appointed, he donned his finest clothes and set out for the castle. Saint Michel sat him down to a magnificent meal. First there was a vol-au-vent, full of cocks, crests, and kidneys, with meatballs, then two big grey mullet with cream sauce, a turkey stuffed with chestnuts soaked in wine, some salt marsh lamb as tender as cake, vegetables which melted in the mouth, and a nice hot pancake which was brought on smoking and spreading a delicious odour of butter. They drank new, sweet, sparkling cider and a heady red wine, and after each course they whetted their appetites with some old apple brandy. The devil drank and ate to his heart's content. In fact, he took so much that he was very much uncomfortable and began to retch. Then Saint Michel arose in anger and cried in a voice like thunder, "What? Before me, you rascal? How dare? Before me, you dare?" Satan, terrified, ran away, and the saint, seizing a stick, pursued him. They ran through the halls, turning round the pillars, running up staircases, galloping along the cornices, jumping from gargoyle to gargoyle. The poor devil, who was woefully ill, was running about madly and trying hard to escape. At last he found himself at the top of the last terrace, right at the top, from which could be seen the immense bay which is distant town, sands, and pastures. He could no longer escape, and the saint came up behind him and gave him a ferocious kick, which shot him through space like a cannonball. He shot through the air like a javelin and fell heavily before the town of Mortain. His horns and claws stuck deep into the rock, which keeps through eternity his traces of his fall of Satan. He stood up again, limping, crippled until the end of time, and as he looked at this fatal castle in the distance, standing out against the setting sun, he understood well that he would always be vanquished in this unequal struggle, and he went away limping, heading for distant countries, leaving to his enemies his fields, his hills, his valleys, and his marshes. And this is how Saint Michel, the patron saint of Normandy, vanquished the devil. Another people could have dreamed of this battle in an entirely different manner. St. Patrick may have driven the snakes out of Ireland, the old serpent. In several of his protean changes, has been back for a nip of John Jameson on several occasions. In Ireland, he speaks with a Borg as soft and easy as peat smoke on a misty morning, attends the Irish sweepstakes, and often confers with Oliver St. John Gogarty in the land of leprechauns and little people and Irish republicans. He easily passes as a logical and three-dimensional fellow, not in the least a figment of the imagination. The following tale, by W. Carleton, makes use of a diabolical basic, the three wishes, in other forms, and with different local color. This story is found in German, Russian, and American folklore. It would be unfair to state that Billy Dawson was the only rogue who has ever outwitted the devil, or has been refused a comfortable and familiar eternity in hell. Dawson's shocking experience is not to be construed as evidence of an Irish Exclusion Act in the nether regions. The Three Wishes by W. Carleton. In ancient times, there lived a man called Billy Dawson, and he was known to be a great rogue. They say he was descended from the family of the Dawsons, which was the reason, I suppose, of his carrying their name upon him. Billy, in his youthful days, was the best hand at doing nothing in all Europe. Devil a mortal could come next to or near him at idleness, and in consequence of his great practice that way, you may be sure that if any man could make a fortune by it would have done it. Billy was the only son of his father, bearing two daughters, but they have nothing to do with the story, I'm telling you. Indeed, it was kind of father and grandfather for Billy to be handy at the knavery as well as at the idleness. For it was well known that not one of their blood ever did an honest act except with a roguish intention. In short, they were altogether a descent connection between credit to the name. As for Billy, all the villainy of the family, both plain and ornamental, came down to him by way of his legacy. For it so happened that the father, in spite of all his cleverness, had nothing but his roguery to leave him. Billy, to do him justice, improved the fortune he got, every day advanced him further into dishonesty and poverty, until, at the long run, he was acknowledged on all hands to be the completest swindler and the poorest vagabond in the whole parish. Billy's father, in his young days, had often been forced to acknowledge the inconvenience of not having a trade in consequence of some nice point of law called a vagrant act that sometimes troubled him. On this account, he made up his mind to give Bill an occupation, and he accordingly bound him to a blacksmith. But whether Bill was to live or die by forgery was puzzle to his father, though the neighbors said that both was most likely. At all events, he was put apprentice to a smith for 7 years, and a hard card his master had to play in managing him. He took the proper method, however, for Bill was so lazy and roguish that it would vex a saint to keep him in order. Bill, says his master to him once a day, that he had been sunning himself, on the day he'd been sunning himself about the ditches instead of minding his business. Bill, my boy, I'm vexed to the heart, to see that you in such a bad state of health. You're very ill with that complaint called all overness. However, says he, I think I can cure you. Nothing will bring you out but 3 or 4 sour sound doses of every day of medicine called the oil of the hazel. Take the first dose now, says he, and he immediately banged him with hazel cudgel until Bill's bones ached for a week afterwards. If you were my son, said his master, I tell you that, as long as I could get a piece of advice growing convenient in the hedges, I'd have you a different youth from what you are. If working was a sin, Bill, not an innocenter boy, ever broke bread, then you would be good people scare. You think, but however that may be, I throw it out as a hint that you must take your medicine till you're cured, whenever you happen to get unwell in the same way. From this out he kept Bill's nose to the grinding stone, and whenever his complaint returned, he never failed to give him a hearty dose for his improvement. In the course of time, however, Bill was his own man and his own master, but it would puzzle a saint to know whether the master or the man was the more precious youth in the eyes of the world. He immediately married a wife, and devil a doubt of it, but if he kept her in whiskey and sugar, she kept him in hot water. Bill drank and she drank. Bill fought and she fought. Bill was idle and she was idle. Bill whacked her and she whacked Bill. If Bill gave her one black eye, she gave him another, just to keep herself in countenance. Never was there a blessed pair so well met, and a beautiful sight it was to see them both at breakfast time, blinking at each other across the potato basket. Bill with his right eye black, and she with her left. In short, they were the talk of the whole town. And to see Bill of the morning staggering home drunk, his shirt sleeves rolled up on his smuttered arms, his breast open, and an old tattered leather apron with the corner tucked up under his belt, singing 1 minute and fighting with his wife the next. She, reeling beside him with a discolored eye, as aforesaid, a dirty ragged cap on one side of her head, a pair of Bill's old slippers on her feet, a squalling child on her arm, now cuffing and dragging Bill, and again kissing and hugging him. Yes, it was a pleasant picture to see this loving pair in such a state. This might do for a while, but it could not last. They were idle, drunken, and ill conducted, and it was not to be supposed that they would get a farthing candle on their words. They were, of course, I don't know what that word is, to great straits, and faith, they soon found that their fighting and drinking and idleness made the laughing sport of the neighbors, but neither bought food for their children, put a coat upon their backs, nor satisfied their landlord when he came to look for his own. Still, the never a one of Bill but was a funny fellow with strangers, though, as we said, the greatest rogue unhanged. One day he was standing against his own anvil, completely in a brown study, being brought to his wits' end how to make out the breakfast for the family. The wife was scolding and cursing in the house, and the naked creatures of the children squalling about the knees for food. Bill was fairly at an impulse, and knew not where or how to turn himself, when a poor withered old beggar came into the forge, tottering on his staff. A long white beard fell from his chin, and he looked as thin and hungry that you might blow him, one would think, over the house. Bill, at this moment, had been brought to his senses by distress, and his heart had touch of pity toward the old man, for, on looking at him a second time, he clearly saw starvation and sorrow in his face. "God save ye, honest man," said Bill. The old man gave a sigh, and raising himself with great pain in his staff, he looked at Bill in a very beseeching way. "Musha, God save ye kindly," says he. "Maybe you could give a poor hungry helpless old man a mouthful of something to eat. You see yourself I'm not able to work. If I was, I'd scorn to be upholden to anyone." "Faith, honest man," said Bill, "if you knew who you're speaking to, you'd soon ask a monkey for a churnstaff as me for either mate to money. There's not a blackguard in the three kingdoms so fairly on the shurgran as I am for both the end and the other. The wife within is sending the curses thick and heavy on me, and the children's playing the cat's melody to keep her in comfort. Take my word for it, poor man, if I had either mate or money, I'd help you. For I know practically well that it is to want them at the present speaking. An empty sack won't stand, neighbour. So far, Bill told the truth. The good thought was in his heart, because he found himself on a footing with the beggar, and nothing brings down pride or softens the heart like feeling what it is to want. "Why are you in a worse state than I am?" said the old man. "You have a family to provide for, and I have only myself to support." "You may kiss the book on that, my old worthy," replied Bill. "But come, what I can do for you, I will. Plant yourself up here beside the fire, and I'll give it a blast or two with my bellows that'll warm the old blood in your body. It's a cold and miserable snowy day, and a good heat'll be of service to you." "Thank you kindly," said the old man. "I am cold, and a warming at your fire will do me good, sure enough. Oh, but it's a bitter, bitter day, God bless it." He then sat down, and Bill blew a rousing blast that soon made the stranger edge back from the heat. In short time he felt quite comfortable, and when the numbness was taken out of his joints, he buttoned himself up and prepared to depart. "Now," says he to Bill, "you hadn't the food to give me, but what you could, you did. Ask any three wishes you choose, and be they what they may, take me word for it, they shall be granted." Now, the truth is that Bill, though he believed himself a great man in point of cuteness, wanted after all a full quarter of being square, for there is always a great difference between a wise man and a knave. Bill was so much of a rogue that he could not, for blood of him, ask an honest wish, but it stood scratching his head in puzzle. "Three wishes," said he. Why, let's see, let me see. Did you say 3? Aye, replied the stranger. 3 wishes. That's what I said. Well, said Bill, here goes. Hmm, let me alone, my old worthy. Faith, I'll overreach the parish. If what you say is true, I'll cheat them in dozens, rich and poor, old and young. Let me alone, man. I have it here. And he tapped his forehead with great glee. Faith, you're the sort to meet a frosty morning when a man wants his breakfast, and I'm sorry that I've neither money nor credit to give to get a bottle of whiskey, that we might take our morning together. Well, but let us hear the wishes, said the old man. My time is short, and I cannot stay much longer. Do you see the sledgehammer? Said Bill. I wish, in the first place, that whoever takes it up in their hands may never be able to lay it down till I give them leave, and that whoever begins to sledge with it may never stop sledging till it's my pleasure to release him. Secondly, I've an armchair, and I wish that whoever sits down in it may never rise out of it till they may have my consent. And thirdly, that whatever money I put into my purse, nobody may have the power to take it out of it but myself. You devil's rip, says the old man in a passion, shaking his staff across Bill's nose. Why did you not ask for something that would save you both and you and hereafter? Sure, it's common as the market cross that there's not a vagabond in his majesty's domain stands more in need of both. Oh, by the 11s, said Bill. I forgot that altogether. Maybe you'd be civil enough to let me change one of them. The sora puriter wish ever was made that I'll make, if only you'll give me another chance to get at it. Get out, you reprobate, said the old fellow, still in a passion. Your day of grace is past. Little you knew who was speaking to you all this time. I'm Saint Mordecai, you blackguard, and I gave you an opportunity of doing something for yourself and your family, but you neglected it. And now your fate is cast, you dirty bog-trotting profligate. Sure, it's well known what you are. Aren't you a byword in everybody's mouth? You and your scold of a wife. By this, and by what if ever you happen to come across me again, I'll send you to where you won't freeze, you villain. He then gave Bill a rap on his cudgel over the head and laid him at length beside the bellows, kicked a broken coal scuttle out of his way, and left the forge in a fury. When Billy recovered himself from the effects of the blow and began to think of what had happened, he could have quartered himself with vexation for not asking a great wealth as one of the wishes at least. But now the die was cast on him, and he could only make the most of 3 he pitched upon. He now bethought him now he might turn them to the best account, and here was cunning came to his aid. He began by sending for his wealthiest neighbors on the pretense of business, and when he got them under his roof, he offered them the armchair to sit down in. He now had them safe, nor could all the art of man relieve them except worthy Bill was willing. Bill's plan was to make the best bargain he could before he released the prisoners, and let him alone for knowing how to make their purses bleed. There wasn't a wealthy man in the country he did not fleece. The parson of the parish bled heavily. So did the lawyer and a rich attorney, and he retired from practice, swore that the court of chancery itself was paradise compared to Bill's chair. This was all very good for a time. The fame of this chair, however, soon spread, so did that of his sledge. In a short time, neither man, woman, nor child would darken his door. All avoided him and his fixtures, as they would spring gun or a man trap. Bill, so long as he fleeced his neighbors, never wrought a hand's turn, so that when his money was out, he found himself so badly off as ever. In addition to all this, His character was 50 times worse than before, for it was the general belief that he had dealings with the old boy. Nothing now could exceed the misery, distress, and ill temper. The wife and he and their children all fought among one another. Everybody hated them, cursed them, and avoided them. The people thought they were acquainted with more Christian people ought to know. This, of course, came to Bill's ears, and it vexed him very much. One day he was walking about the fields, thinking of how he could raise the wind once more. The day was dark, and he found himself before he stopped in the bottom of a lonely glen, covered by great bushes that grew on each side. Well, thought he, when every other means of raising money failed him, it's reported that I'm in league with the old boy, and as it's a folly to have the name of the connection without the profit, I'm ready to make a bargain with him any day. So, said he, raising his voice, Nick, you old sinner, if you be a covenant and a willing, why stand out here? Show your best leg. Here's your man. The words were hardly out of his mouth when a dark, sober-looking old gentleman, not unlike a lawyer, walked up to him. Bill looked at the foot and saw the hoof. "Morrow, Nick," says Bill. "Morrow, Bill," says Nick. "Well, Bill, what's the news?" "Devil as much myself hears of late," says Bill. "Oh, well, Bill, what's the news?" "Devil a much myself hears of late," says Bill. "Is there anything fresh below?" "I can't exactly say, Bill. I spend a little of my time down now. The Tories are in office, and my hands are consequently too full of business here to pay much attention to anything else." "A fine place this, sir," says Bill, "to take a constitutional walk in. When I want an appetite, I often come this way myself. High feeding is very bad without exercise." "High feeding? Come, come, Bill. You know you didn't taste a morsel these 24 hours. You know that's a bounce, Nick. I ate at breakfast this morning, and would put a stone of flesh on you, if you only smelt at it. No matter. This is not to the purpose. What's that you were muttering to yourself a while ago? If you want to come to be blunt, here, I'm for you." "Nick," said Bill, "you're complete. You want nothing bearing a pair of O'Brien Lynn's breeches. Brian Lynn's breeches." Bill, in fact, was bent on making his companion opening the bargain, because he had often heard that, in that case, with proper care on his own part, he might defeat him in the long run. The other, however, was his match. "What's the nature of Brian's garment?" inquired Nick. "Why, you know the old song," said Bill. "Brian O'Lynn had no breeches to wear, so he got a sheepskin to make him a pair, with fleshy side out and the woolly side in. They'll be pleasant and cool," says Brian O'Lynn. "A cool pair would serve you, Nick. You mighty waggish today, Mr. Dawson." "And good right I have," said Bill. "I'm a man snug and well-to-do in the world, have lots of money, plenty of good eating and drinking, and what's more need of a man—" Uh-oh, well, my thing changed. "And eating and drinking, and what more need a man wish for?" "True," said the other. "In the meantime, it's rather odd that so respectable a man should not have 6 inches of unbroken cloth in his apparel. You're as naked a tatterdemalion as I have ever laid my eyes on, in full dress for party of scarecrows, William." "That's my own fancy, Nick. I don't work at my trade like gentlemen. This is my forge dress, you know." "Well, but what did you summon me for?" said the other. "You may as well speak out, I tell you, for my good friend, unless you do, I shan't smell that." "I smell more than that," said Bill. "And by the way, I'll thank you to give me the windy side of you. Curse all the sulphur, I say. There, that's what I call an improvement in my condition. But as you are so stiff, says Bill, why, the short and long of it is that, you see, I am sure you know I have a thriving trade of my own, and that like that if I like, I needn't be at a loss. But in the meantime, I'm rather in a kind of a so don't you take. And Bill winked knowingly, hoping to trick him into the first proposal. You must speak above board, my friend, says the other. I am a man of few words, blunt and honest. If you have anything to say, be plain. Don't think I can be losing my time with such pitiful rascal as you are. Well, says Bill, I want me some money, and then I'm ready to come into terms. What have ye to say to that, Nick? Let me see. Now let me look at you, says his companion, turning him about. Now, Bill, in the first place, you are not as finished a scarecrow as ever stood upon two legs. I play second fiddle to you there again, says Bill. There you stand, with blackguards, coat of arms quartered under your eye, and don't make little of blackguard, said Bill, nor spake disparagingly of your own crest. Why, what would you bring, you brazen rascal, if you were fairly put up at auction? Faith, I bring more bidders than you would, said Bill. If you were to go off to auction tomorrow, I tell you, they should bid downward to come to your value, Nicholas. We have no coin small enough to purchase you. Well, no matter, said Nick. If you're willing to be mine at the expiration of 7 years, I will give you more money than ever rascally breed of you was worth. Done, said Bill. But no disparagement to my family in the meantime. So down with the hard cash, and don't I don't like that word. The money was accordingly paid down, but as nobody was present except the giver and receiver, the amount of what Bill got was never known. Won't you give me a lucky penny? Won't you give me a lucky penny? Said the old gentleman. Tut, 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 said Billy. So prosperous an old fellow as you cannot want it, however bad luck to you, with all my heart, and it's rubbing grease to a fat pig to say so. Be off now, or I'll commit suicide on you. Your absence is a cordial to most people, you infernal old profligate. You have injured my morals, even for the short time you have been with me, for I don't find myself so virtuous as I was. Is that your gratitude, Billy? Is that your gratitude you speak of, man? I wonder you don't blush when you name it. However, when you come again, if you bring a third eye in your head, you'll see what I mean. Nicholas, the old gentleman, as Bill spoke, hopped across the ditch on his way to Downing Street, where of late 'tis thought he possesses much influence. Bill now began by degrees to show off, but still wrought a little at his trade to blindfold the neighbours in a very short time. In a very short time, however, he became a great man, so long indeed as he was a poor rascal. No decent person would speak to him. Even the proud servingmen at the big house would turn up their noses at him, and he well deserved to be made little by others, because he was mean enough to make little of himself. But when it was seen and known that he had oceans of money, it was wonderful to think, although he was now a greater blackguard than ever, how those who despised him before began to come round him and court his company. Bill, however, had neither sense nor spite to make those sunshiny friends know their distance, not he. Instead of that, he was so proud to be seen in decent company, and so long as the money lasted, it was hail fellow we well met, between himself and every fair-faced sponger, who had a horse under him, a decent coat to his back, and a good appetite to eat his dinners. With riches and all, Bill was the same man still, but somehow or other there is a great difference between a rich profligate and a poor one, and Bill found it so to cost in both cases. Before We'll let the clock run out. Before half the 7 years was past, Bill had his carriage and his equipages was hand and glove with the lord this, and my lord that kept hounds and hunters, was the first sportsman at the curl, patronized every boxing ruffian he could pick up, and betted night and day on cards, dice, and horses. Bill, in short, should be a blood, and except he did all this, he could not presume to mingle with fashionable bloods of his time. It's an old proverb, however, that what is got over the devil's back is sure to go off under it. And in Bill's case, this proved true. In short, the old boy himself could not supply him with money so fast as he made it fly. It was come easy, go easy with Bill, and so sign was it on it. Before he came within 2 years of his time, he found his purse empty. And now came the value of his summer friends to be known when it was discovered that, with the cash no longer flush with him, that stud and carriage and the hounds were going to the hammer. Whish, off they went, friends, relations, pot companions, dinner eaters, blacklegs, and all, like a flock of crows that had smelt gunpowder. Down Bill soon went, week after week, and day after day, until the last he was obliged to put on the leather apron and take to the hammer again. And not only that, for as no experience could make him wise, he once more began his tap room brawls, his quarrels with Judy, and took to his high feeding, to the dry potatoes and salt. Now, too, came the cutting tongues of all who knew him, like razors upon him. Those that he scorned because they were poor and himself rich now paid back his own with interest. And those that he had measured himself with because they were rich, and who only countenanced him at consequence of his wealth, gave him the hardest word in their cheeks. The devil mend him. However, who was a hardened sinner, never fretted himself down an ounce of flesh by what was said to him or of him? Not he. He cursed and fought and swore and schemed away as usual, taking in every one he could, and surely none could match him at villainy of all sorts of sizes. At last the 7 years became expired, and Bill was one morning sitting in his forage, sober and hungry, the wife cursing him, and the children squalling as before. He was thinking how he might defraud some honest neighbor out of a breakfast to stop their mouths and his own too, when who walks in to him but old Nick to demand his bargain? "Morrow, Bill," says he with a sneer. "The devil welcome ye," says Bill, "but ye have a fresh memory." "A bargain's a bargain between two honest men, any day," says Satan. "When I speak of honest men, I mean yourself and me, Bill." And he put his tongue in his cheek to make the game of an unfortunate rogue he had come for. "Nick, my worthy fellow," said Bill, "have the bowels. You wouldn't do a shabby thing. You wouldn't disgrace your own character by putting more weight upon a fallen man. You know what it is to get a come down yourself, my worthy. So just keep your toe in your pump and walk off yourself somewhere else. A cool walk will serve you some better than my company, Nicholas." "Bill, it's no use in shrieking," said his friend. "Your swindling tricks may enable you to cheat others, but you won't cheat me, I guess. You want nothing to make you perfect in your way but to travel, and travel you shall under my guidance, Billy. No, no, I'm not to be swindled, my good fellow. I have a better opinion of myself, Mr. D, than to think that you could outwit one Nicholas Clutie, Esquire." "You may sneer, you sinner," replied Bill, "but I tell you that I have outwitted men who could buy and sell you out your face. Despair, you villain, when I tell you that no attorney could stand before me. Satan's countenance got blank when he heard this. He wriggled and fidgeted about and appeared to be not quite comfortable. In that case, says he, the sooner I deceive you, the better. So turn out for the Low Countries. Oh, I think that was yes. It's come to that in earnest, said Bill. Are you going to act the rascal at the long run? Pon honour, Bill. Have patience then, you sinner, till I finish this horseshoe. It's the last of a set. I'm finishing for one of your friend, the attorney horses. And here, Nick, I hate idleness. You know it's the mother of mischief. Take the sledgehammer and give a dozen strokes or so till I get it out of hands, and then here's with you, since it must be so. Then he gave the bellows a puff that blew half the peck of dust in the clubfoot's face, whipped out the red-hot iron, and set Satan sledging away for bare life. Faith, says Bill to him, when the shoe was finished, it's thousand pities ever the sledge should go out of your hand. The great Paragal has a trial to you at sledging. You're such an old able tyke. Now just exercise yourself till I bid you the wife and children good-bye, but then I'm off. Out went Bill, of course, without the slightest notion of coming back, no more than Nick had that he could not give up sledging, and indeed neither could he. But he was forced to work away as if he was sledging for a wager. This was just what Bill wanted. He was now compelled to sledge on till it was Bill's pleasure to release him, and so was to leave him very industriously employed, while we look after the worthy who outwitted him. In the meantime, Bill broke cover and took country to at large, wrought a little journey, work wherever he could get it, and in this way went from one place to another till, in the course of a month, he walked back very coolly into his own forge to see how things went on in his absence. There he found Satan in a rage, the perspiration pouring from him in torrents, hammering with might and main upon the naked anvil. Bill calmly leaned back against the wall, placed his hat upon the side of his head, put his hands into his breeches pockets, and began to whistle Sean Gow's hornpipe. At length he says in a very quiet and good-humoured way, "Morrow, Nick." "Oh," says Nick, still hammering away. "Oh, you double-distilled villain. May the most refined ornamental collection of curses that ever was gathered into a single nosegay of ill fortune shine in the butthole of your conscience. While your name is Bill Dawson, I denounce you as a double-milled villain. I finished hot-pressed knave, in comparison of whom all other knaves I have ever knew, attorney included, are honest men. I brand you as pearl of cheats, a tip-top take-in. I denounce you, I say again, for the villainous treatment I have received at your hands in this most untoward and unfortunate transaction between us. For unfortunate is every sense is he that has anything to do with such a prime and finished impostor." "You're very warm, Nicky," says Bill. "What puts you into a passion, you old sinner? Sure it's your own will and pleasure to take exercise at my anvil. I'm not to be abused for it. Upon my credit, Nicky, you ought to blush for using such blackguard language, so unbecoming of your grave character. You cannot say that it was I set you a-hammering at empty anvil, you profligate. However, as you are so very industrious, I simply say it—" Who says this one? Oh, however, as you are so very industrious, I simply say it would be 1,000 pities to take you from it, Nick. Oh, it is him. To take you from it. Nick, I love industry in my heart, and I always encourage it. So work away. It's not often you spend your time so creditably. I'm afraid if you weren't at that, you'd be worse employed. Bill have bowels, said the operative. You wouldn't go lay more weight on a falling man, you know. You wouldn't disgrace your character by such a piece of iniquity as keeping an inoffensive gentleman advanced in years at such an unbecoming and rascally job as this. Generosity is your top virtue, Bill, but this. You have many other excellent ones, as well as that among which you say yourself, I reckon, industry, but still it is a generosity you shine. Come, Bill, honour bright, and release me. Name the terms, you profligate. You're above terms, William. A generous fellow like you never thinks of terms. Goodbye, old gentleman, said Bill very coolly. I'll drop in to see you once a month. No, no, Bill, you and Philip. You excellent, worthy, delightful fellow. Not so fast, not so fast. Come, name your terms, you sland. my dear Bill, name your terms. 7 more years. I agree, but and the same supply of cash as before. Down on the nail here. Very good, very good. You're rather simple, Bill. Rather soft, I must confess. Well, no matter. I shall yet turn the tab. You are exceedingly simple fellow, Bill. Still, there will come a day, my dear Bill. There will come a day. Do you grumble, you vagrant? Another word, and I'll double the terms. Mum, William, mum. Taste is Latin for candle. 7 years more of grace, and the same measure of the needful that I got before. I or no. Of grace, Bill. Aye. There's the cash. I accept the terms. Oh, blood, the rascal of grace, Bill. Well, now drop the hammer and vanish, says Billy. But what would you think to take the sledge while you stay and give me a... Why in such a hurry, he added, seeing Satan withdrew in double quick time. Hallo, Nicholas, he shouted. Come ye back, you forgot something. And when the old gentleman looked behind him, Billy shook the hammer at him, on which he vanished altogether. Billy now got into his old courses, and what shows the kind of people the world is made of, he also took up with his old company when they saw that he had money once more, and was sowing it about with him all directions. They immediately began to find excuses for his former extravagances. Say what you will, said one, Bill Dawson's a spirited fellow that bleeds like a prince. He's a hospitable man in his own house, or out of it, and as ever lived, said another. His only fault is, observed a third, that he is, if anything, too generous, and doesn't know the value of money. His fault's on the right side, however. He has the spunk in him, said a fourth, keeps a capital table, prime wines, and standing welcome for his friends. Why, said a fifth, if he doesn't enjoy his money while he lives, he won't when he's dead, so more power to him, and wider throat to his purse. Indeed, the very persons who were cramming themselves at his expense despised him at heart. They despised him at heart. They knew very well, however, how to take him on the weak side, praise his generosity, and he would do anything. Call him a man of spirit, and you might fleece him to his face. Sometimes he would toss a purse of guineas to this knave, another to that flatterer, a third to a bully, and a fourth to some broken down rake, and all to convince them that he was a sterling friend, a man of mettle and liberality, but never was he known to help virtuous and struggling family, to assist the widow or the fatherless, or to do any other act that was truly useful. It is supposed to be the reason that he spent it, the most of the world do, in service of the devil, by whose aid he got it. He was prevented from turning it into a good account. Between you and me, dear reader, there are more persons acting after Bill's fashion in the same world than you dream about. When his money was out again, his friends played him the same rascally game once more. I just want to see how much longer this is. I might have to come back tomorrow. No, it's only a few more pages. Rascally game once more. No sooner did his poverty become plain than the knaves began to be troubled with small fits of modesty, such as an unwillingness to come to his place when there was no longer anything to be got there. A kind of virgin bashfulness prevented them from speaking to him when they saw him getting out the wrong side of his clothes. Many of them would turn away from him in the prettiest and most delicate manner when they thought he wanted to borrow money from them, all for fear of putting him to the blush for asking it. Others again, when they saw him coming toward their houses about dinner hour, would become so confused from mere gratitude as to think themselves in another place, and their servants, seized as it were the same feeling, would tell Bill that their masters were not at home. At length, after travelling the same villainous round as before, Bill was compelled to betake himself as the last remedy to the forge. In other words, he found that there is, after all, nothing in this world that a man can rely on so firmly and surely as his own industry. Bill, however, wanted the organ of common sense for his experience, and it was sharp enough to leave an impression, ran off him like water off a duck. He took to his employment sorely against his grain, but he had now no choice. He must either work or starve, and starvation is like a great doctor. Nobody tries it till every other remedy fails them. Bill had been twice rich, twice a gentleman among blackguards, but always a blackguard among gentlemen, for no wealth or acquaintance with decent society could rub the rust of his native vulgarity off him. He was now a common blinking sot in his forge, a drunken bully in the tap room, cursing and browbeating everyone as well as his wife, boasting of how much money he had spent in his day, swaggering about the high doings he carried on, telling stories about himself, and Lord, this at Cargo, the dinners he gave, how much they cost him, and attempting to extort credit upon the strength of his former wealth. He was too ignorant, however, to know that he was publishing his own disgrace, and that it was a mean-spirited thing to be proud of what ought to make him blush through a deal board 9 inches thick. He was one morning industriously engaged in a quarrel with his wife, who, with a three-legged stool in her hand, appeared to mistake his head for his own anvil. He, in the meantime, paid his addresses to her with his leather apron. When who steps in to jog his memory about the little agreement that was between them but old Nick? The wife, it seems, in spite of all her exertions to the contrary, was getting the worst of it, and Sir Nicholas, willing to appear a gentleman of great gallantry, thought he could not do less than to take up the lady's quarrel, particularly as Bill had laid her in the sleeping posture. Now, Satan thought this too bad, and as he felt himself under many obligations to the sex, he determined to defend one of them on the present occasion. So, as Judy rose, he turned upon her husband and floored him by clever facer. "You unmanly villain," said he, "is this the way you treat your wife? 'Pon honour, Bill, I'll chastise you on the spot. I could not stand by, a spectator of such ungentlemanly conduct, without giving you all claim to gallant." Whack! The word was divided in his mouth by the blow of the churnstaff from Judy, who no sooner saw Bill struck than she nailed Satan, who fell once more. "What, you villain, that's for striking my husband like a murderer behind his back," said Judy, and she suited the action to the word. "That's for interfering between a man and a wife. Would you murder the poor man before my face? If he beats me, you shabby dog, you who has better right, I'm sure it's nothing out of your pocket. Must you have your fingers in every pie?" This was anything but idle talk, for which every word she gave him a remembrance hot and heavy. Nicholas backed, danced, and hopped. She advanced, still drubbing him with great perseverance, till at length he fell into the redoubtable armchair which stood exactly behind him. Bill, who had been putting into the blows for Judy's one, seeing that his enemy was safe, now got between the devil and his wife, a situation that few will be disposed to envy him. "Tenderness, Judy," said the husband. "I hate cruelty. Go put tongs in the fire and make them red hot. Nicholas will have a nose," said he. Satan began to rise, but was rather surprised to find that he could not budge. "Nicholas," says Bill, "how's your pulse? You don't look well. It is to say, you look worse than usual." The other attempted to rise, but found it a mistake. "I'll thank you to come along," said Bill. "I have fancied to travel under your guidance. I will take the Low Countries, and in our way, won't we? Get to your legs, you sinner. You know a bargain's a bargain between two honest men, Nicholas, meaning yourself and me. Judy, are the tongs hot?" Satan's face was worth looking at as he turned his eyes from the husband to the wife, and then fastened them on the tongs, now nearly at the furnace heat in the fire, conscious at the same time that he could not move out of that chair. "Billy," said he, "you won't forget that I rewarded you generously the last time I saw you, in the way of business." "Faith, Nicholas, it fails me to remember any generosity I ever showed you. Don't be womanish. I simply won't see that kind of stuff your nose is made of, and whether it will stretch like a rogue's conscience. If it does, we will flutter it up the chimney with red-hot tongs, and when this old hat is fixed on the top of it, let us alone for weathercock. Have a fellow feeling, Mr. Dawson. You know we ought not to dispute. Drop the matter, and I give you the next 7 years." "We know all that," says Billy, opening the red-hot tongs very coolly. "Mr. Dawson," said Satan, "if you cannot remember my friendship to yourself, don't forget how often I stood your father's friend, your grandfather's friend, and the friend of all your relations up to the 10th generation. I intend also to stand by your children after you, so long as the name of Dawson, and respectable one it is, might last." "Don't be blushing, Nick," says Bill. "You're too modest. That was ever your failing. Hold up your head. There's money bid for you. I'll give you such a nose, my good friend, that you will have to keep an outrider before you to carry the end of it on his shoulder. Now, Mr. Dawson, I pledge my honor to raise your children in the world as high as they can go, no matter whether they desire it or not." "Oh, that's very kind of you," says the other, "and I'll do as much for your nose." He gripped it as he spoke, and the old boy immediately sung out. Bill pulled, and the nose went with him like a piece of warm wax. He then transferred the tongs to Judy, got a ladder, resumed the tongs, ascended the chimney, and tugged stoutly at the nose until he got it 5 feet above the roof. He then fixed the hat upon the top of it and came down. "There's a weathercock," said Billy. "I defy Ireland to show such a beauty. Faith, Nick, it would make the purest steeple for a church in all of Europe, and the old hat fits it to a shaving." In this state, with his nose twisted up the chimney, Satan sat for some time, experiencing a novelty of what might be termed a peculiar sensation. At last, the worthy husband and wife began to relent. "I think," said Bill, "that we have made the most of the nose as well as the joke. I believe Judy is long enough." "What is?" said Judy. "Why, the joke," said the husband. "Faith, I think," said she. "Faith, I think so is the nose," said Judy. "What do you say yourself, Satan?" said Bill. "Nothing at all, William," said the other, "but that ha, that's a good joke, an excellent joke, and a goodly nose too, as it stands. You were always gentlemanly man, Bill, and did things with a grace. Still, if I might give an opinion on such a trifle—" "It's no trifle at all," said Bill, "if you spake of the nose." "Very well, it is not," says the other. "Still, I am decidedly of opinion that if you could shorten both the joke and the nose without further violence, you would lay me under very heavy obligations, which I shall be ready to acknowledge and repay as I ought." "Come," said Bill, "shell out once more, and I'll be off for 7 years, as much as you came down with me last time, and vanish." The words were scarcely spoken when the money was at his feet, and Satan invisible. Nothing could surpass the mirth of Bill and his wife at the result of this adventure. They laughed till they fell down on the floor. It is useless to go over the same ground again. Bill was still incorrigible. The money went as the devil's money always goes. Bill caroused and squandered, but could never turn a penny out of good purpose. In this way, year after year went till the 7th was closed, and Bill the hour came. He was now, and had been for some time past, as miserable a knave as ever. Not a shilling had he, nor a shilling's worth, with the exception of his forge, his cabin, and a few articles of crazy furniture. In this state he was standing in the forge as before, straining his ingenuity how to make out a breakfast, when Satan came to look after him. The old gentleman was sorely puzzled how to get at him. He kept scuffling and sneaking about the forge for some time, till he saw that Bill hadn't a cross to bless himself with. He immediately changed himself into a guinea and lay in an open place where he knew Bill would see him. "If," said he, "I once get into his possession, I can manage him." The honest smith took the bait, for it was a well gilded. He clutched the guinea, put it into his purse, and closed it up. "Ho, ho!" shouted the devil out of the purse. "You're caught, Bill. I've secured you at last, you knave. Why, you don't despair, you villain, when you think of what's before you." "Why, you unlucky dog," said Bill. "Is that you there? Will you always drive your head into every loophole that's set for you? Faith, Nick, I never had you baggered till now." Satan then began to tug and struggle, with a view of getting out of the purse, but alas, in vain. "Mr. Dawson," said he, "we understand each other. I'll give 7 years additional, and the cash, and on the nail." "Oh, be easy, Nicholas. You know the weight of the hammer, that's enough. It's not a whipping with feathers. You're going to get anyhow. Just be easy." "Mr. Dawson, I grant I am not your match. Release me, and I double the case. I was merely trying your temper when I took out the shape of the guinea." "Faith, I'll try yours before I have it. I have a notion. I've immediately concerned with the sledge," and Satan sang out with a considerable want of firmness. "Am I heavy enough?" "Am I heavy enough?" said Bill. "Lighter, lighter, William, if you love me. I haven't been well lately, Mr. Dawson. I have been delicate. My health, in short, is in very precarious state, Mr. Dawson." "I can believe that," said Bill, "and it will be more so that before I have done with you, I am doing it right." "Bill," said Nick, "is this gentlemanly treating in your own respectable shop? Do you think if you dropped into my little place that I'd act this rascally part toward you? Have you no compunction?" "I know," replied Bill, sledging away with vehemence, "that you're notorious for giving your friends a warm welcome. Divil and old youth more so. But you must be dialing with bad coin, must you? However good or bad, you're in for a sweet, you know. You sinner, I'm doing it purty." "Lovely, William, but if possible, a little more delicate." "Oh, delicate you are. Maybe a cup of tea would serve you, or a little small gruel to compose your stomach." "Mr. Dawson," said the gentleman in the purse, "hold your hand in, and let us understand one another. I have a proposal to make. Hear the sinner anyhow, said the wife. Name your sum, name your own sum, said Satan. Only set me free. No, the sorrow may take the tow, you'll budge till you let Bill off, said the wife. Hold him hard, Bill, barring he sets you clear of your engagement. There it is, my posy, said Bill. That's the condition. If you don't give me up, here's it once more. You must double the cash and give the last time too. So if you're of that opinion, say aye, leave the cash and be off. The money appeared in a glittering heap before Bill, upon which he exclaimed, the eye has it, you dog. Take your pumps now, and you fair weather after you vagrant. But Nicholas, Nick, here. The other looked back and saw Bill with a broad grin upon him, shaking his purse at him. Nicholas, come back, said he. I'm short a guinea. Nick shook his fist and disappeared. It would be useless to stop now, merely to inform our readers that Bill was beyond improvement. In short, he once more took to his old habits and lived on exactly in the same manner as before. He had 2 sons, one great, a blackguard as himself, and one who was named after him, and the other was a well-conducted, virtuous young man called James, who left his father and, having relied upon his own industry and honest perseverance in life, arrived afterward to great wealth and built the town called Castle Dawson, which is so called from its founder until this day. Bill, at length, in spite of all his wealth, was obliged, as he himself said, to travel. In other words, he fell asleep one day and forgot to awaken, or in still plainer terms, he died. Now, it is unusual when a man dies to close the history of life and adventures at once, but with our hero, this cannot be the case. The moment Bill departed, he very naturally bent his steps toward the residence of St. Mordecai, as being his opinion, likely to lend him toward the snuggiest berth he could readily make out. On arriving, he gave a very humble kind of knock and St. Mordecai appeared. God save your reverence, said Bill very submissively. Be off. There's no admittance here for so poor a youth as you are, said St. Mordecai. He was now so cold and fatigued that he cared little where he went, provided only, as he said himself, he could rest his bones and get an air of the fire. Accordingly, after arriving at a large black gate, he knocked as before, and was told he would get instant admittance the moment he gave his name. Billy Dawson, he replied. Off instantly, said the porter to his companions, and let his majesty know that the rascal he dreads so much is here at the gate. Such a racket and tumult were never heard as the very mention of Billy Dawson created. In the meantime, his old acquaintance came running toward the gate with such haste and consternation that his tail was several times nearly tripping up his heels. Don't admit that rascal, he shouted. Bar the gate. Make every chain and lock and bolt. I won't be safe, and I won't stay here, nor none of us need stay here. If he gets in, my bones are sore yet after him. No, be gone, you villain. You'll get no entrance here. I know you too well. Bill could not help giving a broad, malicious grin at Satan, and putting his nose through the bars, he exclaimed, Ha, you old dog! I have you afraid of me at last, have I? He had scarcely uttered the words when his foe, who stood inside, instantly tweaked him by the nose, and Bill felt as he had been gripped by the same red-hot tongs with which he himself had formerly tweaked the nose of Nicholas. Bill then departed, but soon found that in consequence of the inflammable materials which strong drink had thrown into his nose, that organ immediately took fire, and indeed, to tell the truth, kept burning night and day, winter and summer, without ever once going out from that hour to this. Such was the sad fate of Billy Dawson, who has been walking without stop or stay from place to place ever since, and in consequence of the flame in his nose, and his beard being tangled like wisp of hay, he has been christened by the country folk as Willow the Wisp, while, as it were, to show the mischief of his disposition, the circling knave, knowing that he must seek the coldest bogs and the quagmires in order to cool his nose, seizes upon that opportunity of misleading the unthinking and tipsy night travellers from their way, just that he may have the satisfaction of still taking in as many as possible. That was fun, wasn't it? Let's go back and read some of the comments that I may have missed. Let's see. Oh yes, Liquid Mercury is my yay story time. Not included, simply refuses to decide. Good evening. Yes, good evening. Shrouded Grove. I think I'll make myself a gin with ginger beer for this reading and turn my lamp on. I'm looking forward to this darkly tale. Lovely. Sorry, who wrote the first story? Oh, it's Charles Baudelaire, I believe. Just love listening to you read. Good evening, Richard-Lael. Hello, everyone. Mary Jane, Lunalicious got hit the like button, please. Thank you ever so. Hello, Mary Jo. Greetings. Guy de Maupassant is one of my favorite authors. Debbie Nieto, hello, dear friend. Hello, dear. Lovely to see you. Juntus89 says, you are very sophisticated, Mary Jane King. Guy de Maupassant books look pretty difficult to read. Juntus89 says, those were his 3 wishes. I would have used those 3 wishes much more wisely. So, everyone, sorry, so people know a stone is 14 pounds. Yes, that's true. Right you are, Mary Jane. Fabulous reading. Love it. Your ability to get into multiple characters is freaking awesome. Thank you. Your Irish accent is good. Love your story time. Great job. I love this one, Richard-Lael. Thank you so much for reading to us all. You are so welcome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining me here at the Gentleman Psychic. Thank you for story time. I really enjoy all of the likes, the shares, and another great way of supporting me is to go over to Patreon. You can find me in the link. I still haven't updated it. I'm pulling myself out of a weird mental state, but I've lost about a stone, I think, which is 14 pounds. We have now stated. Anyway, my lovelies, with that, I bid you good morning. I bid you good night. But mostly, I bid you unpleasant screams. Good night.